Hello, I'm Julia Araujo, and this is my part one of Project One. I've been refilming this for so long because I keep going over the talking limit, so I'm just gonna get straight into it. I have all my notes right here, so I'm gonna, yeah. So, my first concept is the duality myth. So, the definition that I have for the duality myth is it refers to ideas of characters in pop culture where there's a good guy and a bad guy. Examples of this could be Spider Man and Green Goblin, or Batman and Joker. There is always a good guy and a bad guy in the film, whether we see it directly or not. So yeah, these things are just two main identities that we use in media, a lot of media. The origins, there's not really any origins to the duality myth that I particularly stumbled upon. It can be seen in a lot of folklore and just like religion. We have God and Satan, we have yin and yang, which all both of these things create some sort of unity in society. We know that, God is good and Satan is evil. We know that yin is actually I don't know which one is good and evil, but I know that there's that. And so there's just there's like religious context to it. You can see in a lot of folklore. It just goes back to many cultures, and so there's not really a specific stem from it. So why is it important? It's important because yes, there's good and bad, but there's a lot more nuance to these characters. And once you can identify which one is good and which one is bad per se, you can dive deeper into these characters and figure out what makes them so good, what makes them so bad. Because sometimes you have good characters who do bad things, and we have bad characters who do good things, and you're just thinking, oh well, that kind of makes them good, and then they do something horrible. Or you can justify the good person's wrongdoings because they're trying to do it for, the sake of society or something like that. So we're also asked to ask AI what they think about this. Um, they said that the duality of myth as the idea that human experiences and the universe operate through opposing yet interdependent forces. I have no idea what that means. And if that was given to me as a like definition of duality myth, I would have no clue what duality myth is. So it just is not very clear. I think it's a little bit too complicated for the average person to understand, and I'm not intelligent enough to understand this. I just don't think that it really came across how we did in class. So I wouldn't use AI's definition. In personal relevance, again, I watch so much movies. I watch so much like media in general, TV shows. I'm a big media person. I read books all the time, and it kind of follows the same story, like build around, if that makes sense, of good and bad. There's a good guy and a bad guy. Personally, I'm reading Crime and Punishment right now. The main character is the bad guy, but we see a lot of horrible people along the book, and you're just kind of thinking, is there a good guy? Is there a bad guy? We don't know. My next concept or key concept is censorship and media regulation. So, for my definition of censorship and media regulation, is that there's media content that's just controlled by the government. This can be restricted based off violence, sexual content, and yeah, like just things like that. Explicit language. Just it's a rating system, kind of just based around society and what we have deemed appropriate for certain audiences. What did this concept come from? This concept came from around the 1980s. There was a lot of conflict about popular music coming along, and parents didn't really like their kids listening to it. Like Madonna, for example, a lot of parents did not like her. She was kind of like how Britney Spears was with our parents. They did not want us listening to that. And so a lot of parents fought for ratings for music. So one example of this was the PMRC, the Parents Music Resource Center, which they advocated for advisory warnings and rating systems on television, music, and things like that. Why is it important? It's important because it's important to know what you are watching and what you are getting yourself into. Certain ratings will give you a certain idea of what kind of movie you're watching, and so that's why we can't a kid just can't walk into a rated R movie. It's important to know what you're getting yourself into, and that's just not for age restrictions, but it's also for content. Some movies will give you content saying warning graphic violence, graphic sexual assault, things like that, and it's really important because sometimes even child or not, you're not ready to see that. You don't want to see that. You might not be in the right headspace to see that. So it's very important. I asked AI what censorship and media regulation was, and it just gave me a really broad explanation, kind of more or less the watered down version of what I just explained, that the government restriction on media. And it just kind of didn't get into as deep as a conversation as we did for like the people being mad about it in the 80s, the music, and we kind of got into more of a political and ideological aspect of it, so it just was not as specific. And again, I chose this concept because it deeply impacts everyone around us. As someone who grew up on the internet and the early stages of the internet and like YouTube and things like that, there are a lot of things that were not regulated that should not have been on the internet and should not have been as easily accessible as it was. And so, honestly, a lot of people my age have seen things that we should not have seen. So I think that it's just really important to have those regulations. And last but not least is desensitization to violence in media. So desensitization is more or less just people not reacting to violence as they should anymore. They've become way too used to violence and a little bit numb towards it. And this is constantly, showed to us in movies, TV shows. It's just even in songs we have people saying, violent things towards women, towards, other people, and so it's just so normalized today that we don't even blink an eye at it. And this concept, it's been an ongoing thing in the media. It does not come from like one specific thing. But we can see it a lot in our old movies. Scarface, for example, which is really popular. I watched it for the first time, and it was a lot more violent than I thought it was going to be, especially for an older movie. Why is it important in pop culture? Again, it's important because pop culture is, especially the horror genre, is growing so much. So this is really important just to kind of keep that in the back of your head, that being so normalized into violence is not normal, and it's not something that we should encourage. We should be an empathetic society, and media is making that really hard, especially even in real life with the news and everything. We get many unempathetic people. And I asked about desensitization to violence in media to AI, and it just kind of gave us like the same thing with a little bit of psychological, mentions about like people watching this kind of tend to be a bit more or a bit less impacted than the average person. But it didn't talk about how like the things that go into it in like we did in class, like how people make it more like cinematic and how technology has advanced so much for it to become easier to portray violence in movies and things like that. And again, I picked this concept because it's just so important to realize it in yourself that violence is a lot more nuanced than, just like, oh my god, that person just got their freaking hand chopped off and stuff like that. Like, these should not be normalized, and you should not be happy to see someone be killed on screen. I get that, we have our franchises like Scream and stuff like that, but it gets to a point where you just enjoy people being tortured, like the new Terrifier series coming out and things like that. That is just pure gore, and the average person should not like watching that. So yeah, I think these are really important points. Thank you so much for watching my video.